Thanks, Rabbi Sam. Appreciate it. And feel grateful to be invited to join this wonderful community for today. I just want to take a moment letting people know that it's touching to take in what you're sharing in the chat, just where you're from, where you're connecting from, and what you're bringing with you today. A lot of prayers for healing, prayers for connection, and that is enriching our space here today. Um, I want to explore something together, a little bit of a little window into practice from an upcoming parsha and an upcoming Torah portion, and then we'll take it into our own practice here. One way to look at the stories of Genesis are to understand, the stories of our ancestors and the beginnings of the world. And another way to look at the stories of our ancestors is also to glean from them certain fundamental and foundational orientations toward worship, toward modes of practice. And really, part of our story is that our ancestors are bringing a certain awareness of godliness, of reality into the world. And so each of the ancestors, in their own way, really model certain orientations of divine connection and of worship. And so I want to look today at a few snippets from the life of Isaac. And if anybody thinks about what does the Torah, what does the Bible tell us about Isaac, if you look at his story, there's not a whole lot that he does. He almost gets killed and doesn't. That's not really something he himself does. Um, and we know at the end of his life, there's the dramatic story with the blessings when he's already, his vision is impaired and he gets tricked by his sons and gives a blessing intended for Esav to Yaakov instead. But what happens in between? What is Isaac doing in between? And if you look at the Torah's narrative, um, the active things that Isaac does is that he digs wells. And this is coming up not next week, but in 2 weeks in the portion of Toldot, where he's basically walking around digging up wells. And he gets into some fights along the way, but he's digging wells. And there's actually a story about two stories that are ostensibly about Isaac praying that have something to do with that act of digging. Oh, and that's what I want to share here. Um, One is, I'm going to drop it in the chat for anybody who wants to see, from Genesis chapter 25, when the Torah tells us about Rivka's barrenness, Rebecca's barrenness, and that Isaac and Rebecca pray for her to be able to bear children. And the Torah uses very unique language to describe that prayer. It says, Vaye'etar Yitzchak, which I'll translate in a moment, that Isaac does something called Vaye'etar to God. And it says, Vaye'ater lo Adonai, that God is, same word, Ye'ater, this thing that Isaac is doing, God responds in kind. And it's a word that, generally is going to oftentimes be translated with pleading or a kind of very insistent prayer. But the Midrash actually, one of the opinions of the Midrash says that actually the word atar, that Hebrew root of that verb, of what is it that Isaac is doing, has to do with the word for a pitchfork and has to do with digging. That Isaac's prayer is an act of digging. They bring an image of a king who has a treasure that he wants his child to receive, and the child is digging from one end of the wall toward the treasure, and the king is digging toward the child from inside the palace, and they're digging toward each other. Isaac's prayer is described as a kind of digging, a kind of inward, downward motion. We might say, on the one hand, you could understand that as being like he's really digging into his position. He's insisting on his prayer, but I think in a deeper sense, it's telling us something about his orientation, that it's about sinking more deeply into where he is and into presence and into the stream of prayer. And that deepening process is the orientation of his praying. And the other verse I want to bring, which is perhaps more familiar to some of us, is from Genesis chapter 24. And the Torah says, Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh. Isaac goes out to converse, in Hebrew, lasuach, in the field, toward evening. And he lifts his eyes and sees camels. This is where he meets Rebecca. It's probably the most romantic story in the Torah. Take a look. Camels and all. Yitzchak goes out, lasuach basadeh. And the rabbis learn from here, this is Isaac praying. The rabbis even say this is Isaac establishing the afternoon prayer, the mincha prayer. Because it says he goes out to converse, to speak in the field, lifnot arev, as day is turning toward evening. But I want to focus on that word lasuach, and that phrase lasuach basadeh. First of all, simple meaning, lasuach is a siach, is a conversation. A sicha is a conversation. So the rabbis understand from this, he must be praying with words. But there's another meaning of the word lasuach, or of the word siach, rather. Siach doesn't only mean conversation, it also means a bush. The Torah in the Genesis describes the siach hasadeh, the bushes of the field. And another way to understand this is that Isaac goes out, lasuach basadeh, to be a bush in the field. That his mode of prayer, of connecting with the divine, might involve immersing himself in becoming part of his surroundings, his presence, what is, and that he is deepening into that. If you think of actually just walking into a field or a meadow, perhaps there is a conversation happening there if you listen, right? You can hear the rattling of the wind and the plants and the buzzing of the bees or of the bugs. There's a conversation happening in the field. And perhaps what Isaac is modeling for us is a mode of practice where we are actually stepping into and dipping into the conversation that's already happening in the field. And that we are part of that conversation and we're part of that field. I'll add one more piece here and then we'll transition into practice in a moment. But the Torah says that he goes lasuach basadeh lifnot arev. He's stepping out to converse or be a bush in the field. Lifnot arev, which means facing or moving toward arev, toward evening. But again, the Hebrew language carries so many meanings. The word erev or arev, which means evening, it literally means mixture. Erev is eruv, is the place where things come together. Evening is where day and night are melding together. It's not nighttime, it's that meeting place. And so it could also enhance this reading that Isaac is going out to join the conversation, to become a bush in the field, facing or orienting toward Erev, orienting toward that place of becoming part of, becoming immersed in and joining with exactly what's happening there in the field and what's happening within himself. So I'd like to invite us into a brief practice here together, taking our guidance from Isaac, from the image and an orientation of lasuach basedeh, of entering into the field, that digging or the deepening in, and having space to experience ourselves in connection with and part of what's happening within us and around us. So anything that I offer here is invitation, and I really strongly and warmly encourage you all to do exactly what feels right for you and not necessarily what I say. But take what I say as an invitation and orient and practice in the way that feels right for you. So first and foremost, I want to invite us to really just take a moment to orient. Just take a moment to notice the space we're in. You can do that with any senses, any modes of perception, really to just locate. And as we do so, to also locate our bodies here in space, and here really inviting us to find a comfortable position to be in. It could be sitting, it could be lying down, standing, walking, but a position that's going to allow us to be in touch with our inner experience and really in just a noticing and awake state. If it feels right, I invite us to allow our eyes to gently close or to hold a unfocused, soft gaze. And beginning to bring the attention into the body, just encountering the sensations that are here. Sensing the body against the surface that is holding us. It could be a chair or a cushion, a couch, the ground. Sensing also the ground beneath us. Perhaps part of our body is in direct contact with the ground. And perhaps even just feeling the weight of the body being gently pulled earthward. Feeling the holding of gravity, the direct connection between this body and the core of the earth. And if it feels right, allowing ourselves to gently release into that tug, that holding. Planted. Noticing the body and the sensations that are present. Welcoming whatever sensations are here. Be it a sense of flowing or contraction, perhaps gentle pulsations or buzzing of aliveness or energy. The flow and movement of the body with the breath. All of these are part of the field that is present. This conversation of life happening through and within us. Welcoming also the air that surrounds the body and enters in. Oxygen becoming life, returning outward. This too is a conversation between body and world. This too is part of the field. And anything that arises in the senses as sensation, as sound, as anything else can be invited in as part of the field. Receiving the invitation here to drop into the field, be part of it. Any sensation that arises or sensory perception, an invitation to expand the field. Returning to our two main coordinates of breath and earth. These two points of connection that can at any moment return us to the field. And taking a moment to express gratitude for the earth that holds us here, and the air and the breath that enlivens us here. All the elements of the field that compose and carry and sustain this life.
Thank you, Rabbi Ami, for that rich foray into practice and those novel readings of Torah, which we'll revisit in just a little bit. In the meantime, I want to invite anyone who's reciting Kaddish to rise in body and or spirit as you are able. And you're welcome as well to share the names of those for whom you're reciting Kaddish. Those reciting Kaddish will come off of mute if they so wish. And so we'll have a little bit of a holy cacophony, but it'll be a sicha, a conversation here. And those who are bearing witness are welcome to offer their loving presence and to respond, Amen. Yitgadal
Yitgadal Shemei Rabbi Yom Yechol Israel Shemei Leila, Sikodakata, Shirata, Abishakata, Benishmata, Yama, Iru, Mishamaya, Chaim, Aleluia, Kol Israel. Shalom,
Amen. May the memories of those who've passed inspire us to acts of righteousness, compassion, and justice. And let us say Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Ami, for leading us in that beautiful study of the text with those novel chidushim, those new insights, as well as that wonderful, rich, and restorative practice. For those of you who want to stay on and share some questions with Rabbi Ami and hear his responses, you're welcome to do so. And for those of you who are departing now, we'll be back tomorrow at the same time. And we'll look forward to having you with us then. In the meantime, take good care, be well, and many blessings in your direction. So, Rabbi Ami, I often like to follow my good friend, Rabbi Mark Margolius's lead here, and just offer a quick kind of précis of what I heard in terms of the teaching and the invitation to practice. So I'll just do that real quickly just to make sure that I got it right. And of course, feel free to chime in with any corrections or if you feel that I missed anything important. So what I took away, what I heard was an invitation to turn toward verses that describe Isaac's prayer practice as a kind of signpost for us for how we might kind of connect with the divine in a way that Isaac did. And first, there was a kind of a turn toward the verse in particular where Isaac prays for a child, and then God responds in kind with that word, ayin taf resh, right? Vaye'atar Yitzchak, and then vaye'ater lo yod he vav he. Isaac, traditionally it's translated as praise, but actually you pointed out that root ayin taf resh actually is related to a pitchfork and a shovel, right? And it has a sense of digging into or quarrying into the bedrock of Isaac's own being, as it were, or the soil of Isaac's own being, right? In order to connect there with the divine. And there was that beautiful image from the Midrash, how as he's digging, right, his heavenly parent, that is God, right, who's conceived as a king, is digging from the other direction, right, to reveal the treasure to him, treasure of God's own presence and of God's own blessing. And then you invited us to turn to a later verse, an earlier verse in the Torah, where Isaac is about to meet Rebecca, his wife, and the text says that he went out into the field, lasuach, lifnot arev, right, to have a conversation, traditionally understood as prayer, right, before evening, right, or toward evening. And you read that, creatively suggesting that the word lasuach is related to the Hebrew word siach, a bush. And so the description here, evokes the sense of Isaac, again, kind of rooting down, into the soil of the field of prayer, or the field of spiritual practice, or the field of his own being, right? And from that place, turning toward Arev, which of course means mixture, right? In the sense of kind of two things meeting, in this sense, perhaps encountering or meeting, the divine, as well as all of the elements of the field, which are themselves an expression of divinity. So did I get that right?
I love hearing it in your words. Yeah,
Great.
right. Spot on, and then some.
Okay, good.
Appreciate
And
it.
that really was an invitation for us to begin to relate to our own experience as a kind of field, and our practice as a practice in really kind of rooting down, digging into, the field of the body itself, right? The earthy part of our being, the body. And from that place, perhaps, right, to actually find ourselves, intimately meeting or encountering the divine in prayerful meditation.
Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, this is really a rich teaching, and there's so much here for us to take away. And I just found it personally, really restorative and enriching to ground down in that way. Feeling the earth beneath, feeling the elements, the embodied elements of my life, the breath, sounds, body sensations, and,
Got lost for a second. So
sorry, there was maybe some background noise here.
no, it's the connection. Yeah.
Oh, no problem. And I just want to invite anyone who wants to share a question with Rabbi Ami to put your questions in the chat and preface them with the word question in caps. That way it's going to be, easy to find you because there's a lot of comments coming in. We have a question here from Sally, right, which I think is a really rich one here. How do we heal through love as Isaac does in this difficult time for the Jewish people?
That's a great question. I'll start by saying I'm with you in the question. What to me this practice touches on is a fundamental shared reality. Like, Rabbi Sam used the word bedrock, which I loved when you were saying it back, but like when we orient here, earthward, groundward, we are all equally together, rooted in this single ground, this single earth, this single divine source, this single field of life. Beyond like the personal resource for connection that can provide, I feel that is a really, no pun intended, but it's a very grounding orientation to take in terms of how I approach another person and how I approach the shared reality that we all share. And I think, if we take that in, that can have pretty obvious applications, whether it's on a social level, on a um, religious level, on a ecological level. But really, it's like digging into and rooting ourselves in shared reality as our point of departure. To me, that's a much more generative place to start than where we oftentimes begin our conversations about things that matter to us.
Thanks. What a lovely answer. I'm just checking the chat here to see if there's any additional questions. Um, and there's a question here about how to work with and move away from all the outrage in our community. Maybe you want to speak to that as well. I realize the question has more to it, right? It's related to some kind of political developments here in the US, but we try to stay away from politics as much as possible in this venue, and not to impugn anyone's motives or anything like that. But certainly, I think we can all sense that there's a lot of outrage and rage in general in the world right now, right? As things shift politically in whatever way they do, in whatever way they impact us. And how do we work with all that anger, And how might
Yeah,
this practice that you taught be a support in that regard?
yeah, I love that question. Um, I'm gonna, my disclaimer here is like being a rabbi or a therapist or just a person like doesn't mean that I have answers to any of these questions. So that I truly believe. This isn't false humility. Um, but I'll share just kind of what it evokes in me when I hear the question. Um, Isaac is Kabbalistically, mystically identified with the divine quality of gvura, which can be translated as might or severity, or the quality of what we call din, judgment. All the heaviness in the world, all of the limit and boundary of the world, the physical world, the cosmos, the internal world, the social world, the divine world, there is division within this unified field. Um, so I have a number of things to say about it. On the one hand, outrage, where there's anger, beneath the anger, there is almost always deep care. And anger or outrage are very natural and adaptive and necessary responses to something that we care deeply about, being or feeling under threat or feeling violated. It's basically saying, I want to put a boundary around the thing that I love. I want to ensure that I'm going to protect the thing that I care about most. I believe that part of the work is, first of all, like there are things that, outrage is appropriate for. And boundaries need to be put out, things that we care about need to be spoken. And at the same time, how to work with that fire of anger in a way that's constructive and not destructive, or that actually meets another as opposed to destroying or cutting away. That's a place where I think we need to learn to get more skillful around. And maybe here too, it's how can we deepen to connect with the care that's beneath the outrage. And if I can connect with the ground beneath, that fire, um, I'm in much better chance for my expression of it or communication with it, or even what I'm seeking to make happen with it. I'm in a much better situation for that to be effective than if I'm spewing flames. So I can see a kind of parallel there in Isaac's being, in his Kabbalistic symbolism, and even in this practice of, okay, there's there's smoke, what's the fire? There's outrage, what's the care? I'm really worked up. Can I take a moment or moments to continue to contact and identify what is my deep care and love inside of here that I'm wanting to protect and to ensure? And can I then move from that connection to that place and see what happens?
Yeah, that's a beautiful response. And the image of digging a well is really powerful as well, right? Because we have to get through the outer layers, right? To the subterranean layers underneath to be able to actually, unleash those waters and to be able to drink their nourishing, take in all that nourishment. And it's like that in my experience too, what you said really resonated that, a lot of the time when I'm feeling anger, what's really going on beneath is something more tender. But I have to use my mindfulness to kind of ground down into the anger, right? So that I can slowly kind of investigate, well, what's really underneath it, whether it's sadness or compassion, care, or worry about the people I love or the things in the world that I love, that are changing or what have you. So thanks for that. Really beautiful. There was a question here about Isaac as a character, right? He's often viewed as having significant blind spots, right? Areas where he's not aware. I mean, he literally, as you mentioned, right? He literally does go blind later in life. But it seems also that figuratively speaking, he doesn't really, understand that Esav, for example, according to the tradition, is really kind of pulling a fast one on him, isn't really like the saintly child, pretends to be, and so on and so forth. So the question from Wendy here is that, those blind spots create divisions within his family and lead to rancor and violence. And your interpretation suggests a person who is mining his interiority and seeking a much deeper connection to an existence, to existence in God, right? So how do you square those two things,
Yeah.
And it really
Yeah.
speaks to the role of midrash, right? And what we're doing when we do midrash.
Yes, very much, very much. Um, I think here this takes me more to my trauma-informed lens. So permit me that. Um, First of all, I'll start off generally. Yes, the Torah, all the heroes of the Torah are deeply flawed, and that's, I think, part of what keeps it real. Um, so that's just there's humanity there. There is no even a person who is deeply mining their interiority is a person who's going to have their drama and their blind spots. But there's something very deep in Isaac's story. If we take the longer arc of the narrative, um, as far as my read of the biblical story goes, uh, the defining moment and really what we might call a constitutive trauma of Isaac's life is the Akedah. His own father bringing him up the mountain for the God that his father believes in and holding a knife to his throat. In the Torah, Isaac and Abraham never speak after that moment. We never see them together till Abraham's burial. And you know what? This is wild. Isaac never says a word to God directly in the Torah. There are no words in quotation that the Torah tells us Isaac is speaking to God. Isaac's physical blindness that comes later in life that we see around the story of Esau and Jacob, and where we find those blind spots, that divisiveness, what ends up kind of getting really messy for the subsequent generations. The Midrash actually says that Isaac's blindness was a byproduct of, at the Akedah, he looked up when he was on on the altar, and that the tears of angels fell into his eyes. that the angels, so to speak, were watching this and crying, how could this be? This cannot come to pass. And that the tears of those angels landed in Isaac's own eyes. And that later on, that developed the blindness that we see play out in his own family story. Let's take it out of Midrash and back into Pshat. Let's take it back into just kind of narrative. To make it very simple, Isaac experienced almost being killed by his own father. Isaac has a brother, Ishmael, who was also almost left to die by being sent away by their father. In my mind, part of what Isaac came to was, I am never going to cut out one of my own children. There's just nuts that's not happening in Isaac's house. So Esav can be whoever Esav is. But for Isaac, this is my son, and there's no changing that, and there's nothing I'm going to do to demote him, to push him away, to exclude him. That's my read. There were complications that happened anyway. And to my mind, there's something very understandable. To me, I have a lot of compassion for Isaac in these stories. And yeah, if anything, this is like another rabbit hole, but if anything, that those divisions in the family may have had more to do with things between Isaac and Rebecca that went unacknowledged or unexamined than between Isaac and his sons, because that's really where it happened. Rebecca was the one who planted the trickery instead of like, hey, why didn't you just go talk to him? Right. So that's a whole nother chapter. Um, I'll leave it there because I think I could just go off on that, but
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
There's a lot more to say, but thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I do want to acknowledge that there's some folks who've written to the chat here about their own infertility journeys. And I want to thank you for your honesty and vulnerability. And I know that sometimes reading stories in the Torah that are about infertility can be activating or upsetting. I pray that wasn't the case for you today. And if it was, we will always aim to do better. And in the meantime, just want to thank Rabbi Ami for that beautiful teaching and practice and for your sage, wise responses. And I want to thank all of you for sticking around here for this question and response session and for joining us today. We'll hope to see you again tomorrow at the same time. In the meantime, take good care and be well.
Thanks, everybody. Great to be here with you.
All the best.